Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to briefly introduce Invennt. We do know how to spell Invennt, but we've consciously added an extra in because that Venn diagram is extremely important to us as a business. It's all about finding that sweet spot in the middle. It's about combining excellence in different parts to create that sweet spot. As a business, we have a vision about being at the core of a positive construction sector. I've been in the construction sector for approaching 40 years now. I've seen some brilliant things, but I've seen so many ordinary things, and indeed I've seen some bad things. And what I want to do is ensure that our business is moving this sector forward so that our children are actually encouraged to join the sector rather than avoid it. So at its best, it's great. As a consultancy, we don't want to just work for suppliers, we don't want to just work for clients, we want to work for both. We want to find that sweet spot in the middle, because when you get everyone aligned, that's when you can produce something truly brilliant. Digital. I was a bit concerned on the table that I was sitting on. The digital on that table seems to focus around BIM. So I don't want to disappoint anyone here. I'm talking about much more than just BIM. I'm talking about a digitally enabled industry that is actually going to be core of a growing society, and a society that is looking at this construction sector and saying, without that, we cannot achieve the society that we want. And as a business, what we do is on the left-hand side, we work with businesses to look at their strategy, look at their plans for delivering that strategy, how they take that strategy to market, and how they actually deliver on the field, so that they satisfy their shareholders, their customers, the people that work for them, but also the societies in which we live. But we recognise that that's not easy. And to achieve that, you've got to invest. You've got to invest in time, and you've got to invest in money. So we also work with clients to see how we can unlock that finance. Now that might be looking at the way they run their businesses themselves and just some financial optioneering to improve their balance sheet and give them the push to go forward. Or it may be actually looking at how we can get some new capital finance into that business. Too often, the industry and businesses within construction do not sell themselves well enough, and therefore why do we expect others to invest in them? We look at people and say, how can you lift your head up to get a very positive message across to the institutions and financiers to make sure they are looking at us being a good bet. And the final point is, as an industry, we do brilliant things. I've seen it all of my career. But two things we don't do. We don't herald it, and more importantly, we don't claim back the R&D tax credits that we're entitled to for doing it. Because too often, we are humble and earnest, we solve problems. Other people do the R&D. Well, I'm sorry, we do R&D in here, and we're entitled to get our R&D tax credits back, as long as we then reinvest it in improving everything, so that we do create the value through construction, which is the mission that we're on. Now, what's really important to me about this is you can't achieve any of that unless you understand the benefits and the potential of digital. And we're only scraping the surface of that, but we've got a subsidiary company that we've invested in for the last 3 years. It has analysed the UK construction sector over 20 years. We've got a good understanding of how individual businesses have performed. We understand how clusters of businesses have performed in micro and macroeconomic variables. And we are now developing a model as to how those same clusters in company types are likely to perform in certain macro and microeconomic conditions. We cannot stand up in front of our clients and be credible unless we can look backwards and also predict forward. And I don't know how anyone can do that without access to good digital information. The ICE has been going for 200 years, as you all know, and we're delighted to be working in collaboration with the ICE to help them celebrate that. As I mentioned, I've been 40 years in this industry, so not quite as long, but I don't know look as well as the environment that we're in at the moment. But this is a really important day for us, because it's a continuation of a programme that we've had this year. Earlier in June, we hosted a collaboration roundtable, which was looking at data. And the conclusion of that roundtable was that it is an untapped gold mine. It is the currency of the future. But there was also a lot of frustration around that room. It said, well, we know that it's there, but how can we unlock it? How can we get to it? And I think that's what this programme is all about, is to get like-minded people, not about expertise. I am not a digital expert, but I am a digital explorer. I am interested, I am curious, I want to learn from others, and that's why events like this are really important for me. Not to stand up here and spout at you, but to create an environment that I'll hand over to Dan with the following questions, but also to learn from you and learn from the experience and expertise of the IC over 200 years. So Dan, I could hand back to you, and these are the questions that I know you wanted to cover.
Brilliant, thank you actually. Would it be easy if I stand here actually, and you guys are there, and I've got questions, I can do Slido when it comes to Slido. I'm conscious we're going to be overrunning, but I'm sure you all don't mind losing a few minutes in lunch. Okay, so I think it might be quite useful before we sort of jump straight into questions, if each of the others have just got 30 seconds or a minute or so of your sort of take on this and kind of give us a feel for where you sit in this space. It'll also help me figure out who to ping questions to, because I'll know what your kind of background is.
So me first, so Ben Pritchard, consultant at Invennt. So Brendan's obviously introduced us and what we do. I come from a procurement and quantity surveying background. Apologies to all the engineers in the room. And I've been very much, I am a millennial. I share too much, often I'm told. But I come so very much culturally in, which goes against construction, and I don't understand why we can't be more fluid in how we understand what each other are doing, what our outcomes and goals are, and that's what I try and bring to our clients, just an understanding of where we want to go, why are we going there, and how can we get there together.
I'm Adam Dabrowski, I'm the IS Business Readiness Lead at Tideway. I'm not a civil engineer. My background is delivering change and transformation change programs across a number of industries. So I always look at adopting change from a people and process perspective, and for me, kind of the technology underpins that.
Good afternoon, Michael Tracy as Maybe Bridge. I actually am a civil engineer. And in some ways, I'm not a digital expert either, but we see digital engineering as one of our key differentiators at the moment. And what we've found so far, and we really feel we've only started this journey, we've got new products, new services, and a new way of communicating with our customers already. So we're on the journey and we want to continue with it.
So I'm looking at these 4 questions, and in a way, I don't like them too much because they're too easy just to answer. We've actually got to get up, does industry need to change its mindset when it comes to digital? Well, I think the whole conference so far already tells us the answer is yes. So the more interesting question is, what's preventing it from happening? So we could all sit in conferences like this and agree until we're blue in the face that we need to be more digital, we need to change our mindset. And then we all go back to our offices and do tomorrow what we were doing the day before the conference without necessarily changing. So how do we break that? I'm going to perhaps start with Ben, who made the daring comment that he's a millennial. So
just about. But
so do you go into the office and stare in open-mouthed horror at all the dinosaurs around you and wonder why they're not being more digital? And
well,
what do we do about it?
present company.
Present company, of course.
I'm actually one of the oldest in the company. We have a very sort of young, diverse workforce that we're very proud of, and it's great. We all come from very different backgrounds. We've got architects, engineers, and people from around the world that look at things very differently. And it allows us, through the sharing of ideas, knowledge, and backgrounds, to come up with different solutions, different ideas. And it is all about having that trust and communication with each other, which is often lacking when it comes to construction projects. That we're able to come up with solutions that you might not normally.
But that's in your own company.
Yeah, sorry.
Of course, part of what you do is dealing with other companies,
Yeah.
isn't it? So do you find it difficult to translate what perhaps you can learn internally? Do you find it difficult to translate that into helping other people perhaps do the same thing?
Sometimes, so they can't see, they're all, too often we're after the short-term gains, not the long-term vision. And it's about helping people understand, differentiate, show them what's good for them, and building the trust to help them realise that this is actually the right answer. So often it comes down to trust.
I mean, Michael, you said you are a civil engineer, so in some ways you're sort of the target of some of this, one might argue.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
What's your view?
Well, I mean, I think what we've done is it's very hard to find the time, and I think it's the way we've always done it is the enemy. And what we've done is we put a digital engineering team in and said, get out there and spend time, and you have to release time for them to actually go to the market and see what's happening out there and fail and come back with some ideas. But as a result of that, if you don't, just doing things what we do always, and say this is an add-on, I think there's a danger, and you mentioned about BIM, I think there's a danger that some companies will feel they've been forced to use BIM, a bit like another IT system, and it won't work. You have to understand that this could be transformational. And the only way it can be transformational is if you put time in and actually really work how it's going to change. And I think the earlier professor was talking about the linear processes we use. And we've noticed that in some of the changes. We've got an online configurator, and we're now bringing it into our estimating system and changing the whole way we deal commercially with aspects. And not linear, but actually putting it into our BIM team first and then working backwards.
I find it very interesting that you use the phrase there, digital engineering team, as if that's different to other engineering teams. Do you think even that part, it is, but
well,
is that part of the problem again, that at the moment we're still thinking digital's in the silo over here, everybody else are getting on with their day job over there?
And hopefully I'll get to the stage I won't be saying that anymore, but we felt it was necessary to make that change.
Yeah.
I think people often see it as a bolt-on to other programs, processes, where it actually really needs to be the kind of DNA that runs through the organisation. And collaboration is key to that. So you can't just have a siloed group just working on digital and then 90% of the other organisation sort of cracking on with their day job. They need to merge much more closely in their thought process.
Do you find people sort of checking things the old way? They don't necessarily trust new tools, that sort of thing. Is that sort of still go on?
I think generally people don't like change, so I think there's a bit of a learning curve to get people up to speed, and then I think the powerful thing is if you can turn someone who's a dinosaur who likes the kind of old ways of working and finds that this new way of working is the best means to be more productive and do their job better, then they become the advocate, and that's when the dynamic shift.
In some ways, that's an interesting point, isn't it? And I found this as well, that somebody who's been converted, somebody who knew the old way and the new way and can say, no, the new way is better, is often a better advocate than the young millennial, for whom people would say, yeah, but you don't realise we used to do things better in the old way, and if only you knew.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's why I think we touched upon this, the reverse mentoring scheme, where you kind of marry up that industry knowledge with the knowledge of technology, and then you've got quite a powerful tool when those two elements fit neatly together.
One of our post-its, steal your thunder, one of the greatest innovations that we'd seen in the last 12 months was a foreman who'd been in industry 47 years.
47 years.
Who came and asked if a form could be digitised because it would help him massively in his day job. And it's when you can get to that level of understanding how the productivity improvements can put in place, you're winning.
But he did have an apprentice with him for 6 months, so the apprentice was learning the industry, and the master was learning
From the apprentice.
from someone who's a digital native.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, because again, and I think this touches upon one of the challenges in the tech sector. Now, when I'm talking tech conferences, I'll make the point, there isn't really a tech sector. There's technology applied to every sector, retail, construction, etc. But actually, those who are on the sort of tech side of the house do sometimes forget that this isn't just about creating a shiny digital widget that's really cool. It's got to be making somebody's life easier, improving an outcome, removing friction somewhere. And if you do that well, then there shouldn't be resistance to adopting it. The idea that digital form actually made his job easier in an obvious way, rather than something that he's going to grumble about and sort of do begrudgingly. So leadership, come back to that term leadership again, that kept coming up in the earlier session. How much of this problem, do we believe that the leadership within the sector gets this sufficiently? Are there still too many companies that point to the IT guy to do digital while getting on with the day job still?
I think there's still a bit of a gap. I think there's probably a gap across other industries as well. I think surveys show that often leaders think they've got a digital vision and they've translated that to the company. And when you ask the middle layers and the bottom layers, they can't articulate that. And I think more work needs to go into kind of say, this is my vision and this is a roadmap and this is how I'm going to bring you all along on that journey to get there. I think that's certainly work in progress, probably across every industry, but probably certainly in this one.
Brendan, I was struck by your comment as well about people thinking BIM is it. Is sometimes there a bit of a narrow view, perhaps?
I think so, thank you, because again, even the conversation I think is a bit uncomfortable for me, because when I first came in this industry, and I'm disappointed that Ben said it as well, we sort of like to joke about we're different. We were brought up this way, or this is our background, which is different to yours. There's always been new ways. New ways are not new, okay? Leadership needs to be quite clear on where he or she is trying to get their organisation, or indeed their family. And then what they've got to do is make sure that people are prepared to follow them. Now, if digital supports that, do it. And make sure that you've got the necessary skills and budget available to achieve that. If the old ways do that, we'll use the old ways. Let's not become a slave to digital. And this is where I challenge Michael in the spirit of what we're up here. I don't want to create a digital title. I want digital to underpin what we're trying to achieve. And I go back to it. We talk too much about the engineering. Let's think about what is this society going to look like in 200 years' time? When there's an ICE 400, what will they be discussing? They won't be discussing anything that we've been discussing here today. So we need leaders that are trying to think 200 years ahead, not 5 years and 3 years and what their business plan says and what the FD says. But what they do need to have is a digital strategy, whether it's a digital on the CE board, debatable. But absolutely every leader should say, how can I not have a digital strategy if I intend to compete and to succeed in this world?
Absolutely. That's really interesting. I come on to the third question here, which is about conventional construction business models potentially preventing adoption. Now, I often come down to the point that technology isn't just about a bit of tech to do something differently. It is about potentially unlocking a new business model, a new way of actually delivering infrastructural services. It might be a cheese example, but classic examples here are things like Uber and Airbnb, which didn't actually invent any technology. Uber is not really a tech company that's invented anything. They use the technology Steve Jobs invented, the smartphone, and all they're doing is using real-time data and communication, putting two people in contact with each other. I need a ride and I've got a car, and enabling a transaction. And yet on the back of that, they're worth $50 billion or more. So business models can be a challenge. And with my Living Planet hat on, actually, where we sell technology to the built environment, we often find people's processes are the problem. We get somebody who says, I love what you're saying, I'd love to do what you do, but I don't see how we can break our process because we're a sausage machine and we know how we do, we do the same thing every time. How much of that have you guys come across as being a problem? So even if an individual wants to do it, they're just locked in this inertia of the business process.
So sometimes operating models get in the way. So I think on tech change, people have traditionally looked at the IT department to deliver that. They'll give requirements, the IT department will go off and do something, and then 9 months later, something's delivered and it's not quite what they wanted. And there's got to be a much greater move to this collaborative or squad way of working where there's much more focus up front in terms of what does the customer really need, and kind of moving to kind of an agile or hot housing approach where you see stuff early on and then you've got the time and the money to adapt it.
I've been thinking a bit more broader than that. I mean, we've had circumstances where we've been talking to a real estate developer who's really excited about adopting a digital platform for a building, but they can't break the process that says they're going to go to tender and get somebody else to specify a BMS system. And even though they actually want this digital platform, they end up with something different because the process just pulled them off in the usual way of doing things. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Yeah.
I mean, I think that's
How do we break that?
Well, in some ways, I think what companies have to do is move away from the sort of adversarial nature that construction is, and have to have this view. We talked about project bank accounts, for example, or having a gain share. All that sort of thing has to be a change of behaviours, and unfortunately, we've got a long way to go on that because it comes back down to, you look at the last, I think this week, the profits of the top 100 contractors were out, and they're very, very wafer thin. So, there's commercial pressures, but I think...
Does that make people risk averse, do you think?
I think it does, yeah. And again, it comes down to all the good ideas. Your example is useful. You want to collaborate with somebody's cheaper. Use them, And we have to move away from that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to come back to my vision about creating a society. I think we've got to ensure that clients have an option. Now, if as an industry we've given the clients the option to use confrontation, use contract terms, use cheapest price, then that's what they're going to do. Why wouldn't they? So what we've got to do is make sure that we are upping our game to share a common platform with the clients of the future to demonstrate the real value, the real strength that we provide, so that we are on equal par. So we're actually negotiating the right terms for the future rather than them being imposed upon us. And it goes back to what I said earlier. All of the construction companies are undercapitalised. So how do we change that? We've got to make sure that we're attracting the right investment. We're not going to attract the right investment if you look at the top 100 at the moment. So who are the people that are going to break out of that? If it's not the top 100, I suspect in 200 years' time we'll be looking back at the people outside of the industry that have come into our industry and transformed it, done something completely different, have got the funding behind it, have got the bright people behind it, and are actually taking us in a different direction. And please God, it's the right direction. Because for too long, we've looked at each other. We've looked at each other if we're in that top 100. There are people now looking at us and saying, we can do better than that. And they're probably right.
That has happened in industry after industry. You look at Kodak, you look at Blockbuster. Blockbuster turned down the opportunity to buy Netflix in 2000 for $50 million. Blockbuster went bankrupt, Netflix is now worth $50 billion. So I do want to move on to the Slido questions, and I kind of think the answer to the question before again is a little bit obvious almost. Is a knowledge gap preventing us from fully exploiting digital? And in fact, I think again your BIM point, Brendan, kind of almost summarises that, doesn't it? If your knowledge of digital is BIM, then the answer to everything is BIM. Has anyone anything interesting to say about that, or is that just taken as read, do we think? Is this knowledge gap part of the problem?
Could I just say, as a consultant to the industry, I am very concerned at the lack of pull. There doesn't seem, well, forgive me, I sincerely hope there's a tremendous amount of pull within this room for digital solutions, but there certainly isn't at a corporate level. And therefore, there are products and services being peddled out there that are either being bought or are being dismissed because they're not fit for purpose. And we really do need to get people in this room and beyond to be quite clear on what we want, and then start to influence the boardrooms to make sure that there is a pull for that.
And that actually brings us quite nicely on to the first question on Slido, which is, in the large, we are engineers here, but we may work in organisations which are not predominantly civil engineering. At a board level, for example, how can we kickstart change when there's resistance? So this sums up really the leadership challenge, perhaps the challenge of boards that themselves are risk averse. So I'm reading this question as basically saying that I might be an engineer and I might understand the need for a digital approach, but I'm working in an organisation that doesn't necessarily share my vision. I wonder if, Adam, I mean, you're very involved with organisational change management, aren't you?
That's right.
And that is, whatever the reason to change, we all know change management is challenging.
So ProSci are the biggest change management research company in the world. Say change isn't embedded because leaders don't back up change. So I think it's important for those boards, even if they don't fully understand digital, to empower the people in the organisations that do to crack on with it and implement it. Also, I think there's a risk that exec move on to the next shiny thing or the most sort of critical thing that week, that month, that year.
Blockchain. Why are we building things on blockchain?
Precisely. And kind of sort of celebrate success a little bit too early, move on, and then this thing called digital was kind of something we were doing last year, and then it's kind of just drifted a little bit. So I think it's kind of having that sort of laser focus on empowering people to do it, acting as sort of sponsors to unblock stuff, and then making sure that they don't drift off and move on to the next thing.
So it's as much about not putting constraints in the way of people as it is leading and inspiring people to do it. It's sort of, that's two halves of the coin in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, I suppose they need to be articulate in the vision where they want to go, and then let the troops crack on and get there.
And this is very much Brendan's point about the need for a vision, for understanding. This isn't just about dealing with today's challenges, it's about preparing our organisation for tomorrow's challenges. Project 13 comes up the next question. I don't know how much that was discussed this morning. I apologise, I missed the morning session in the conference. Does everybody in the room know what Project 13 is? Anyone not know what Project 13 is? Okay, that's helpful. So, do you think Project 13 promotes an improved business model, encouraging collaboration and innovation? I mean, I guess that's an interesting challenge because Project 13 is a work in progress, and perhaps it's a bit early to ask that question, but I would welcome your thought. Are any of you guys involved in Project 13 directly? No. Okay. So maybe I'll answer that since I'm indirectly involved. I would say the jury is out and it's too early to tell, because actually this is still too immature as a project to be able to say that it is promoting an improved business model. But I'm extremely heartened by the buy-in that we've got from government, from the relevant sort of supra industry organisations, and from key players within the industry. And one of the challenges with some of these sorts of projects is that they can be tried to be imposed by organisations like ICE and the government on actual companies who do stuff for real in the real world, who aren't really interested in this latest initiative from government. Actually, I see this as being much more bottom-up as well. And certainly the workshops I've been involved with, it's not just the people who deliver infrastructure, it's the people who are going to run and operate infrastructure. People like Thames Water, people like Crossrail and HS2 being involved. And actually I find that really, really interesting. So I would say ask that question again in a year or two. So did somebody?
Yeah, I think the challenge for Project 13 and a lot of similar things is that it isn't seen as something that is only appropriate for mega projects. Our industry is large, disparate, all sorts of shape and size projects, and it can get lost because they think it's only suitable for Crossrail 2. It's only suitable for Heathrow expansion. It's not suitable for my project. I won't even bother reading it. We need to make sure that it translates all across the spectrum of our industry.
It's a really bad point. So there's a...
Just on that, I think there's some recent evidence. I was at the Cambridge Centre for Smart Infrastructure recently. One of their projects was some really high-tech analysis of the columns during construction using their fibre optic sensing technologies. And the reality of our industry is a little snapshot, which is very current, is pretty tragic in that they had guys from an esteemed university doing some cutting-edge digital in our industry. And then my question to them was, well, I'm assuming you handed those sensors over to the building operator so that they could use that data for asset management. And the response was, well, we kind of suggested it, but no, they went and cut the cables off. Now, that's the reality of what's going on out there, is even when you have stuff put in your building by somebody else that can be massive. I mean, this was measuring temperature of the entire column, and I think trains as well, I'm not sure. But they did a lot of analysis on the creep and whether it was good design and efficient design through construction. But in reality, when they come to reuse that building in 50 years' time, that data is also invaluable.
Yes.
It could even be a fire prediction system. All sorts of things, just because you've got the sensors in the column. And they cut them off.
So that is a really, really interesting point. And as we know, one of the points behind Project 13 and other related projects about how do you take something like BIM or sort of 3D modelling that's used in the design phase and the construction phase and actually make it relevant to the operation of the building. How do you ensure that you may start to actually map real-time performance data from sensors and from systems in the building back to something like the BIM model to actually assess how well it worked and to basically close that loop so that when you're designing the next building, you can use the real-time operation of the current building against how it was meant to perform. It's a performance gap. And I think there's a lot of will to do that intellectually, but you're right, often as soon as the skid, the tires actually hit the road, you hit this challenge between people who are designing and building and the people who are operating a building. And they often have quite fundamentally different views of the world. It's a problem that, as a small company, and when I've been planning out on selling tech into this business, we often have this challenge that you might be trying to sell to somebody who can design and build a building, something that will reduce the OPEX of that building, and some of them don't care. Because at the moment, that doesn't filter through to evaluation change. Eventually, I believe it will. Eventually, I believe smart connected buildings will be worth more. Right now, they say, why do I care if this building is going to use less energy? I don't pay that bill. And then you even get that as a subset within buildings where the building owner and operator doesn't pay the bill, the individual tenants on each floor or in each shop do. And so this kind of disconnect of different parts of the chain can also be a challenge. I think that's very much one of the things you get there. The guys operating the building didn't care about that data if they had their set way of doing things. That's a good example. But also your point about mega projects leads in nicely to the question, where should an SME start when incorporating a digital approach? And you're right, it is very easy to talk about the giant companies of this world having a digital lead on their board and getting to grips with it. So if you're an SME somewhere in the supply chain, aren't you just at the whim of the people above and below you in the
Well, can I answer that, because that's where we are. And how we looked at it was we identified some problems. For example, data. We sell all around the world. We just wanted to see where we should point our resources. We did a lot of data analysis. But the other thing was we reacted to opportunity, and so we used digital as a means of solving one and reacting to the other. And one of the things, unlike what you're saying, is it's one of the products that we've developed through this is monitoring and actually smart bridges, smart infrastructure. And there is an increasing market that we feel for that. But not in that case, obviously.
But you feel as an SME, how much are you constrained by the big companies you often might subcontract to, for example, or work with? I mean, do you find sometimes you want to do things you're constrained?
Sometimes they're not interested. That's the issue,
Right, they just want the output, they don't care get.
Absolutely, yeah. But it is changing.
I'm conscious of time. There is only one more question, so I'll throw it out there. And then what we'll do is ask each of the panelists just to give sort of a 30-second summary, and then I think that's the end. So the final question, which is, again, actually quite relevant to that last point. Why is the mindset of IT directors so hostile to software as a service products? I constantly find they seem to only want big SAP, ERP-type data capture approaches rather than highly productive workflows. I guess the first question is, do you recognise that? Now, some of you may say, actually, no, I don't think that's true. Have you come across the IT director who likes SAP but doesn't like small and agile? I see a sort of a frown from that.
I think that might have been the case 5-10 years ago. I think the landscape's moving slightly. I think there's some well-publicised large SAP implementations that have not gone very well, and the corresponding CIO has moved off the stage. So I think there's more appetite now.
Do you think the phrase "no one ever got fired for buying IBM" is not necessarily
precisely? I think that might change. So I'm seeing more appetite for more nimble, smaller projects, proof of concepts.
Looking at fail fast, move on.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, and a lot of in this space, places like Spotify are held up for that's exactly their culture. Fail fast. We get squads together. We learn through failing, and I think that kind of mindset is starting to permeate across other industries now as well.
Brandon, it looked like you wanted to jump in and say something.
I've always viewed it as two banks on the same river, that the IT solutions are always going to be down that bank and the businesses are down this bank. And they'll be parallel to each other unless you bridge across. Now, I know as a business owner, I can have exactly my view of what I want, but it's going to be very expensive if I go over to the other bank and buy exactly what I want. But equally, if I only buy what they're selling on the other bank, it's not going to give me what we require as a business. So we've got to get that bridge together. I've got to be crystal clear what I need and why I need it. I've got to be able to articulate that properly and ensure that they don't sell me the sexy bits, that using that term earlier. They sell me the bits that are actually going to help me deliver what I need. But if I can't articulate what I need, they're going to sell me the sexy bits and all the other bits as well, and they'll fail. But they won't.
So that's really interesting. Okay, we are very short of time. Can I just ask you each, maybe 30 seconds, no more? Since you were just speaking, Brendan, we'll go to the end, we'll go to Michael and work about this one.
Well, as I said, we're just starting on this, and we see the benefits already. And I think the things I would emphasise is you need process change. You need to actually challenge the way we've always done it. I think you've got to put time into actually seeing the benefits, and you've got to collaborate and look outside the company. They're the key things outside.
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of that. I think the times are changing and people are getting on this journey. There's more to do. I think there's a risk that if you look too internally focused, you won't get the solutions that you want. I think introducing disruptors, people who kind of challenge some of the status quo and bring some of that kind of new knowledge, whether that's from other companies or other industries, is going to be quite key in bringing that through. And then it's the leadership, sponsorship, and seeing the digital journey all the way to the end.
It might be uncomfortable, but it'll be worth it. And I think that we call it a journey, but it's understanding where the journey's going. So without understanding where you're trying to go, it's pointless starting.
And last word, Brendan.
Well, I think it goes back to leadership. This is about behaviours, but sometimes people think of leaderships within businesses or organisations. I think there's also personal leadership. I was struck by the question about SMEs. I was struck by if you're in an organisation, how do you influence there? If you care enough you change it, or you go to somewhere that will support you making that change. I think there is a subservience in this industry. I think we all care and we want to get better. We're a bit too loyal, or a bit too subservient, and every now and again we need to disrupt that and have personal and business leadership to take us to where we need to get to. Because if we don't, someone else will.
And I think that's a brilliant point to end on. They call this disruptive technology for a reason. And if you're not careful, you could be the one that's disrupted. And I mentioned Kodak, I mentioned Blockbuster. There is no company in this sector that is immune to being made irrelevant if they don't basically stay on top of this stuff. Brilliant.